Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Nets in the Water. I'm your host, John Barreto. Very excited. Today we have a really special episode, the beginning of potentially a new norm, of a new kind of co-host situation. You know him, you love him. We have Shevin on. It's really exciting stuff. Shevin's going to be kind of a co-host of Nets in the Water to come in here and just chop it up for a little bit. So Shevin, thanks for coming on.
John, thankful to be here. Anytime I get to spend time with John Barreto is a win in my book. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know Jesslyn some bit.
Yeah, I'm excited. And then, as the next reveal is our guest for today, we have Jesslyn Manni. Jesslyn is a member of our team here at Studio 316. She's the funniest member of the team at Studio 316, but also have a rich history in Catholic education and education in your faith. And just going to get a chance to talk about kind of your background and your perspective on this world today. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm super excited to dive in on this. A little bit about you. You were born and raised Catholic. I think you had kind of a level of depth in your faith through high school, through college. What was kind of like your spiritual journey?
Yeah, I grew up Catholic, so my parents instilled from a very young age just the importance of our Catholic faith. I have very early memories of wherever we were traveling for sports or extracurriculars. My mom always made it a point to get us to Mass, so that would usually result in us going to whatever Mass time fit the schedule. So it didn't matter if it was an 11 a.m. in Korean or a 4 p.m. in Spanish. We were there, we were at Mass, and we participated. So that was kind of the beginning of the faith journey and just understanding the importance of going to Mass, participating in the sacraments. My parents also made a lot of sacrifices to send me and my siblings to Catholic school. So I went there 1st through 8th grade. And that was very influential on my faith and my journey. I also attended like a youth group with Regnum Christi, so it was called Challenge. I would go every week. It was all my friends. I really enjoyed it. And they have summer camps, so that was also a big part of my journey. That's really where I fell in love with Jesus, and the faith was through those summer camps and the relationships I built with those girls that I was attending that with.
Yeah, so something about this, because I feel like a lot of people will talk about like they were born and raised in the faith, but I feel like there's that one moment where it kind of goes from like a part of your upbringing, the same way that your family we only put the Christmas tree up after Thanksgiving. And then it shifts from like this thing my family does to like, whoa, like this is real. What was that for you? Yeah.
That happened in 7th grade. I was at, yeah, I
That's
know.
Early.
It is. I was at the summer camp that I was just mentioning. I was out at adoration. So they had like an all night adoration where you could go out. You get to spend an hour with Jesus throughout the night and just accompanying him. So as a 7th grader, that's a really cool experience and opportunity to be like, oh, I get to wake up at 2 a.m. You go and wake up the next girl after you.
You're such a rebel.
It's really cool. And so I went out at my 2 a.m. slot.
Dang,
I walked out there. I had another friend who was playing the guitar. I saw Jesus, in the Eucharist. And it was just looking out on this beautiful lake. The moon's like lighting the lake, and it was just a really profound experience of me in that moment, realizing like that is Jesus. He is my best friend. I don't want, like, this is what I want for the rest of my life, and whatever that looks like. So I think that was the first moment where it was like a profound yes, and then from there it's been a lot of little yeses since then.
Wow.
So when did you start participating in that type of stuff, like youth groups or things like that?
I think 5th grade is when you could start going to it was Challenge was the youth group.
Did you have an experience or a lesson that you encountered, and maybe you kind of got it then, but the older you got, maybe it's something recently, it really clicked, like the value in that lesson. Like maybe you're like, wow, I should be a good person.
I think for me, it started as like, I am very social, and so all of my friends were going to this, and I really wanted to just be a part of that and go to this for the social aspect of it and like hanging out with people. And then the more I attended those things and went to youth group, I was just like, oh, this is cool. Like the faith is so cool, and like there's cool people who live out the faith, and just like the experiences I had were just like so transformative that I was like, why would I want to do anything else besides live the faith? It just like, it felt like a no-brainer. And I know that's such a gift to have that, because not everyone experiences the faith in that way. And there can be a lot more like way more obstacles when it comes to that. But for me, it was just like, yeah, I want this. Like, I love my life, and the life I have is because of Jesus. Like, why would I change that?
That's great. The faith being a no-brainer at such a young age is like, I mean, I know for you, it's probably like 5th grade. You were like, all right, cool, I'm locked in now. You were pretty,
or 30,
you were pretty wired.
Whatever.
Yeah,
I was right around there.
It's the same zip code. It's, you know, what is it in eternity? You know,
Right. Yeah, I took it real serious. Oh, like a lot. Yeah. Right.
But okay, so you had this big conversion in 7th grade on a not silent retreat, on an overnight retreat.
It was like summer camp. Like,
oh wow, so, okay,
during
summer
the day
camp.
we were like throwing mud at each other, you know, like doing typical summer camp activities, canoeing, whatever else you know you do at summer camp. And then there's a huge spiritual and like formative aspect to that as well. So
fast forwarding, then you find yourself at Catholic college later in life, D1 athlete, by the way. This is D1 Jesslyn. That's huge.
Yeah.
And then you ended up being a public school teacher in the Bronx. Was that like a part of your plan in college? When did you make that call? Like, what was up with that whole decision?
It's funny, when I got to, so I picked college, I went to Mount St. Mary's University in Emmitsburg, Maryland. I chose it because I wanted to go D1 for track and field, and I had the opportunity to do that there. When I was looking at colleges, I told my parents, I was like, I don't want to go to a Catholic school. I've done that, like been there, done that, did the Catholic thing.
Of course.
Not that I wasn't living my faith, but I was just like, I want to be able to evangelize to more people. Well, come to find out, a Catholic school, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is Catholic there. And so there's so many opportunities for evangelization that I just didn't realize going into it. But yeah, I got there. I had already committed to go to this school for track before checking to see if they had the major that I wanted. I had intended on studying early childhood education and working more in the daycare realm of things. But when I got to college, they didn't have that. So that, needless to say, I ended up in elementary education as, you know, a K through 6th grade teacher. So that was the route that I was on. And yeah, so God just made it clear that like, this is what you're going to do and this is where I want you. And the same was true for entering into teaching in the South Bronx with the Seton Teaching Fellow program. I went and interviewed there. I was also interviewing with Life Teen at the time for their summer. I knew I wanted to do a service year. I just didn't know where. And I was interviewing with Seton Teaching Fellows more as a formality just to get interview experience. They flew me up to New York. It seemed fun. Wow. So I was like, this is cool. I'll see this through. And then on the flight home from that experience, I ended up deleting my Life Teen application and never submitted it because I knew that's where I was called to be for the next year. And then COVID hit right after I said yes to being a Seton Teaching Fellow. So it was like I said yes. 2 days later, everyone gets sent home from COVID. And I had just agreed to move to New York City, which at the time was like the epicenter of
It's like the worst
COVID.
possible place to be.
And I was like, God, are you sure? Like, are you going to, you know, pull me out of this? And he didn't. And I'm glad he didn't.
But you mentioned in this journey, these Seton Teaching Fellows that were in the Bronx, or based out of the Bronx. Mm-hmm. What even is that? What are you talking about?
Yeah. Okay. So it's essentially it's a service year program. They have college students who have just graduated. Most of them are not with an education background. A lot of the people who do this program are just looking for a way to serve for, you know, a year, and then they'll enter into their field. A lot of them do end up staying, but essentially you are living in the Bronx, so you live in community. Now there's other places that you can get sent, but I was doing it in the Bronx. So you go to these areas where it's just maybe an underserved community. So there's, you know, a lot going on there. We were sent there. We live in community. And then during the day, we teach at the public school. So it was Brea Public Charter Schools is the school we were teaching at. And then they have an after-school program called El Camino. So that's your primary focus as a Seton Teaching Fellow is, you know, working at the school during the day and supporting in the way that you are needed there. But then after school, you're the primary teacher in the classroom for the faith formation program. So these are students who have little to no faith background. A lot of them are in the program because their parents are working and they need after school care, and that's the only after school care that the school provided. And all of this was a result of a lot of Catholic schools in New York City closing. There's been a lot of like closing and mergers within the Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of New York. So they founded this, this model of having the public charter school paired with the Catholic after-school program to offer an opportunity for Catholic education for families who want it but maybe couldn't afford it or just were seeking that for their students. Yeah.
So you would do, it was one year program. Mm-hmm. You would do part teaching, part like catechism.
Yeah.
Why even bother have like these well-formed Catholics teach in the classroom where you're not even teaching religion? Why not just make it like an after-school program and then during the day go like work at a soup kitchen or something?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think a big part of that is the familiarity of having you be in the school the whole day. And I think it could be a challenge for a lot of people doing the program, that same question of like, why is this a priority at all? Because there are times where the stuff that happens during the school day would take over and maybe even take priority over the after school program. I got asked to cover maternity leave. So rather than being a support teacher, I was then the full-time teacher for a second grade class. So I was pulled from my kindergarten students to be with the second grade students that I didn't know. And so it was frustrating at first because I was like, I already have relationships with these kids. I see them after school. I want to be with these kids. But there's an opportunity for evangelization there too. You're working with other public school teachers, other people who maybe know the faith but aren't necessarily Catholic or had Catholic upbringing. So there's so many more people that you can evangelize to through your witness, because since it's a public school, you can't talk about the faith, but that doesn't mean my kindergartner couldn't come up to me and ask me a question about El Camino and the after school program. And I'm allowed to answer that because they're asking and they see me as their faith formation teacher. So it just created some really unique experiences that the students were able to have. And then they have that relationship for the years to come. So when I stayed on as a public school teacher at Berea the next 2 years, my students who had me as their catechism teacher were so excited. And I have this one memory of Andy, one of my students. He came in and he was sitting at my table. He like puts his sweater over his head and he's like, "Look, Miss Manni, I'm Mary." And he was just like the excitement of like talking about the faith. And so they would just bring that stuff up and they knew they could talk to you about that. And so I think that was really why that was such an important part of it, that they couldn't be separate. You can't have one without the other. Like Berea has to be a part of El Camino and El Camino has to be a part of Berea.
Yeah. Like to have the formation without a relationship is like what is even built on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously like a little bit of leading question, like, oh, why have you teach? But also it's like, it's true. Like, I mean, at the forefront of it, even as a Catholic educator, you might fall into this trap of like, oh no, like I do the religion thing during religion class and the rest of the day I have to like play dress up as a secular teacher and kind of like do this thing. And I'm given this 50-minute period to do it. And then that's that on that. But even in this public school, like it was built on this cornerstone of a Christian witness wrapped into an overtly Catholic formation that happened at a different point. But both of them were completely intertwined in a way that just like it bolstered both.
Yeah.
Do you still pull from those experiences? I ask because, like, sometimes we could experience something in prayer or a moment, whatever the case may be, and we know that there's grace packed into that, and we can go back to that moment and pull from it. We take that and put it right back on our heart, keep praying about it. If you do, is there any particular situation or moment like Andy that you go back to and you're like, man, this moment or this encounter, I like to pull from it?
Yeah. It's funny because the one that comes immediately to mind, we talked about when you interviewed me to work here. One of the questions you had asked was like the influential people in your life and
the top 5.
The top 5 influential people. And one of them is a little girl who was in my class. Her name was Asaph. And I had her as a kindergartner. So it's beautiful to get to see kids in catechism in kindergarten because they are blank slates. They know nothing about the faith, and things that I just like thought I always knew, I realized I had to learn, like the sign of the cross, like these prayers. They don't know any of this. And so it was so eye-opening for me, and I learned so much in that year because I saw just the way they would light up or get super excited about things that had never like interest me in the faith, or just I never realized like the importance. And one of them was this time we were talking about Pentecost. And so Asaph, she loved the Holy Spirit. Like, she was so enamored by the Holy Spirit. We were on Zoom because we had to do Zoom classes because this is COVID. So we're doing faith formation on Zoom that day. It's just me and Asaph there. Like, no one else showed up to class that day. And I'm teaching her about Pentecost, and she like sees the Holy Spirit, or a depiction of the Holy Spirit. She sees the dove on the screen. It's like, Miss Manni, like, what is that? Because I was looking at the liturgical calendar. She saw the like sliver of red, and she's like, what's that red sliver there? And I was like, oh, that's when Pentecost is. And she got so excited. It was coming up. She was like, hold on, Miss Manni, I have to go tell my grandma. She mutes the camera, or mutes the microphone, runs over to her grandma. So I'm just watching from the other side of the room. She's like, her arms are flailing. She's just so excited to tell her grandma about Pentecost and that it's coming up. And for me, that was one of those moments where I was like, wow, like, this is childlike faith. And this is just like, why am I not that excited about the Holy Spirit and Pentecost? Like, that same enthusiasm and just, zeal she had for the faith was just so encouraging, and a good reminder for me that, there's so much I have to learn as a catechist. And I truly, like, I'll say it all the time, but they taught me way more than I ever taught them in that year. And they still, like, thinking about those times are incredible. And she ended up getting baptized that year, which was also beautiful. And I got to go to that and see her, receive the Holy Spirit. It was an incredible year. So, yeah.
Great. No, thanks for sharing. I've probably talked to, 800, 1,000 educators at this point. We know that there's a lot of competing priorities. There's a lot on their plate, but those moments with the students, it has to be things like that in order to kind of like your spiritual adrenaline shots to keep going. So that's cool. No, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
And so this time with the teaching fellows, you did it for 1 year. Then for 2 more years, you decided to stay.
Yeah.
Did you continue doing catechism class? And also, like, why not just do the 1 year thing and then bounce?
Yeah. So the program itself is 1 year. There are people that do a second year and stay in that same role. I did not feel called to stay as a Seton teaching fellow. I felt much more called to stay as a Berea teacher and continue working in that role. So I didn't teach catechism that next year. There were opportunities to like sub and help out with stuff, but I disconnected from that side of things, and it made it really challenging because I was like, oh, I'm not getting to talk to them about the faith in the same way. Mm-hmm. I'm not as involved in the part of this that I really did love. I enjoyed the teaching aspect of it, but the part that I didn't realize I liked more was the faith aspect. So after that first year of teaching, I went back to being involved. And so I entered into like a mentorship role for the Seton Teaching Fellows. And I did like formation with a few of the people in the program. And so that was an opportunity for me to be involved again. And then I was staying more for catechism and just checking in on them. So yeah, it was the decision to do that was just because it is meant to be a 1 year program. It's not really structured to be more than that. Mm-hmm. But I quickly realized how impactful that was on my prayer life, my faith life, and just the time there.
Yeah, because once you were no longer doing the catechism class, what did it look like to for that to be a spiritual pursuit? Because now there was no overtly spiritual stuff. For me, it almost seems like it would lack the payoff. Like I'd be doing it, but then the fun part of catechesis isn't there.
Yeah, I learned very quickly that I was like, that was I think the first time in my life where I realized I was in charge of my spiritual life, because prior to that, in elementary and middle school, you have so much more structure to your life. You have school, you're praying at school, you have maybe things you're doing. I was in youth group. I was in all of these things that were aiding my formation, aiding my growth and there were people checking in, right? I had spiritual directors, I had guides, I had mentors, and same thing with my year as a Seton Teaching Fellow. I had people who were telling me okay, you're going to pray with your community. You're going to go to this Bible study. You have this group. All of that thing was built out. So I never had to put in that same effort. And that was the first year where it was I'm not teaching catechism anymore. I am going to school to work at a public school, and then I'm leaving. And so what am I doing the rest of my time? What am I doing to grow in faith? Mm-hmm. And it was challenging. I had to really, seek out a lot of help and guidance with how I could continue to grow in my faith. on my own without having the same like scaffolding and guides that I had before.
What was some of the advice that you got for that?
I think being involved in things was really helpful. Finding community was huge for me. That was, I think, the biggest like thing that I did that I think contributed to helping get back where I wanted to be. At that time, the city was just starting to reopen and, you know, more events were happening, but where I lived was very isolated. So I lived in the Bronx all 3 years I was there because I wanted to be in the same community that I was serving. But where I lived was close to my school, but very far from anyone else living there, from any, like, even to get to the subway, it was a 15-minute walk to get there. So, you know, if you're going out to things on a weekday or late at night, it just was more challenging to do that. So once I started investing more in community, and then the following year I moved in with different roommates and just had way more community with that, it got a lot easier because then you have people to hold you accountable, invite you to things, to go to these different things to grow in your faith, and just get in a better routine of doing that.
Mm-hmm. That's a fun tie-in too to what you guys were talking about of earlier in your faith life, when you had this moment of like, oh, the community is like cool, like it's enjoyable to be a part of, and here you are years down the road re-entering into the same realization that like the community is the cornerstone of your service, especially as a teacher, when like even in the classroom, I'd imagine it feels a little isolating sometimes. Like you're with the kids and you interact with them, but there's still not other adult people. Mm-hmm. So there's still probably some kind of itch that isn't scratched socially in that. Like you feel isolated, but still so surrounded almost.
Yeah. No, I was so grateful. The school I was working at, we had a co-teacher. So it wasn't just me in the classroom, it was me and one other person. And you're with them 7 hours a day, and then along with, 30 students in the classroom. So that becomes your community. You're with these people, you're invested in them. And so it makes it hard because each year, these students leave, they go to the next grade and you get moved to a different co-teacher. So you really invest in this community for a year and then it changes. But I think there's a lot of beauty in that too, and just getting to, be detached from that and grow in different ways. And then, God is good. So I had a couple students where I got to move up with them when they went from K to first grade. So I got to be with them again, which not a lot of teachers get to do that. But yeah, I mean, it can be isolating. And I think for a lot of teachers, and in some of my other experiences, it was, because when you're by yourself, it can be exhausting. It can be just draining to be doing that. And there's a lot of change, or maybe just things I didn't realize when I was a student that teachers are having to do on top of teaching the material, right? They're making sure everyone's paying attention. They're making sure that, the kids who maybe are not getting it, they have to re-explain it to them. There's just so much management that comes besides the teaching, even just emotional regulation. If you're having a bad day, you can't project that onto your students like that, because then what you're going to get back is that same energy will come back. Like if I were ever upset or just like having a tough time teaching that day, I'd be met with the students responding in that way because they're meeting the energy that I bring to them. And so it was just very eye-opening of like, okay, this is way more than just like, can I teach you how to read, or can I teach you, these skills in math? It's much deeper than that.
And your antidote to it was just community, it sounds like. That like by entering into the other people around you, it gives you that place to invest in it, not change, right? People who can be with you. It gives you a place you can like have a bad day around them and they can be there to support you. And you don't have to be like on, and it offers you kind of a place of recharge so that you can pour into the community in your school and your students better.
Yes. Yeah. I think community is crucial in anything, like in school, having other teachers. Like we had a grade team. So it was not only just me and my co-teacher. It was a big school. So it was me and my co-teacher, but then there were 2 other first grade classrooms. There's 6 teachers that are all experiencing the same thing. And to be able to go to them, like you just bond very quickly. Same thing outside of that, like going and hanging out with my other friends who were living out their faith. Like I craved that and I needed that, because that's the only way in the world that we're living in, and just like the challenges that we're being faced with to really go deeper into relationship with Christ. It happens through that community. So there's a temptation to want to isolate yourself and be on this journey alone, but we need to be with these other people because they bring us closer.
I wonder how common that is amongst the teacher circuit, the feelings of isolation. I ask that because I'll go and do a school visit and it'll last 60 or 90 minutes and then I'll take a nap for about a month. And I marvel at, if I'm a teacher, I'm doing whatever, 5 to 6, 30 to 40 minute sessions every day, 5 days a week. And to your point, you can't really have a bad day because it's going to get absorbed and then returned back to you if that's the kind of vibe that you're putting out. But I wonder how you maintain that level of, man, it's almost like if you're always kind of performing. You're always having to kind of put your best foot forward regardless of how you feel internally.
Yeah. I remember reading something that was like, teaching is just improv to an audience that doesn't want to be there and they're tired. They want to go home. They don't care about the improv that you're doing. And like, but yeah, it's like you're teaching and they don't necessarily care. They have to be there. Like they're forced to be at school. And so you're like, oh, this lesson's going to be great. They're going to love this. And then, you know, they're like not feeling it. And it's hard. It's disheartening when you are doing that because you're like, man, I thought this would be a hit and it wasn't. But then you move on to the next and it's like, all right, well, that was 30 minutes. Let's keep going. And so it's definitely, it can be isolating too, especially if you're teaching by yourself. And I know a lot of Catholic schools, there's one teacher per grade. They don't even have the community to be able to go to like, hey, how did this lesson go for you? Like I was very fortunate to have that, be like, hey, did this lesson go over well with your kids? Did you do anything? I could collaborate so much, but that's not always the case. And I think there needs to be a greater sense of community within, you know, teachers and just, yeah, you need people to go to, whether that's someone who teaches the same thing or it's the teacher in the, you know, the classroom next to you. There needs to be that community because we can't do it alone. They say it takes a village, and that's true not just for raising a kid, but for teaching them too. So, and
especially in Catholic schools, right? Because you're the public side, you probably have more resources, more aids, etc. So on the Catholic side, it's going to be a little bit more lane.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And,
no.
100%.
So you're going to say you're going to.
I had we'll put a pin in this. We can go back to where we left off. A question I got. So you went to school. What did you major in college?
Elementary education.
You did? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was wondering what made you delete the app. You said you got on the airplane, you went and checked it out, and then was it the first class visit? You know what I'm saying? Did
it
they
was the kids.
Yeah.
It was the kids, 100%.
Oh, the kid. I thought you said it is. Like, it is. It was a nice
class.
It was a nice airplane, right? It was a kid.
No, it wasn't first
towel.
class. I think I was sitting in a middle seat.
Wow, you did penance and you did the right thing.
Yeah. No,
the kids,
it's funny. So when I flew out to New York to interview, it can be an overwhelming experience. New York City, the first time you go there, especially the Bronx, can be very overstimulating. I got on the plane, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm terrible at charging my phone. My phone is constantly at like 1%, for better or for worse. In this case, my plane got delayed, so I was getting there late. My interview was supposed to start at 4. The plane was landing at like 3:30, so I had to Uber to the hotel. I wasn't even ready or dressed for the interview, so I was pretty stressed, which I also like don't typically get stressed. So I was very just out of my element in this, and so I get to the hotel to change for my interview. I change in like 2 seconds. I type in the school name and then just start walking. So I'm like walking through, and in the Bronx, there's it's called the Hub. So there's just a lot going on there. You're walking through it. I'm walking through the Hub. There's all these vendors, like these people trying to sell you things. They're like, do you want to buy these flowers? I'm like, no. Do you want to buy these shoes? No, I'm good. So I'm walking through here, just booking it to get to the school. I walk in the school building, and I met with my best friend, who she was a Seton Teaching Fellow the year before. And she was like, you're at the wrong school. And I looked at her. I was like, no, I'm not. Oh, also my phone died in the Uber. That's why I brought up it was on 1%. So I couldn't even tell anyone like I was on my way. My phone had died. I get there. She's like, this is the wrong school. And I was like, no, it's not. Like, I'm at the right school. She's like, no, you're supposed to be at the other school. I just started crying. I was like, I don't want to be here. Like, this is the worst. Like, I was so overwhelmed. They were so generous and like the person who's in charge of the program, she came up to me and she was like, "You don't know me yet, but I'm in charge here. Don't worry." Like, it was just so, like, she was so comforting. She came up to me and she's like, "This person's going to walk you over to the other school," which is like a 7-minute walk. So she walked me to the other school. And so, like, this whole experience, like, just looking at that, you'd be like, no way I'm doing this program. Like, I'm not getting into this program. Like, they just watch me cry. Like, they're like, she can't handle adversity at all. Like, it's a horrible first impression. Like, it's so bad. And I know how important first impressions are. Like, I didn't even have a coat. Like, it was February in New York City, and I'm walking around without a coat on, like, just booking it through the Bronx because I was so stressed I was going to be late. And then I get to the other school, and the person who was interviewing me, she was like, "Oh, great, you're here. Our other person was on the same flight as you, so she just got in too." I had no idea. Like, then I have to go teach a class. So I get a group of these kids, and I get to teach them a catechism class. So that's
for the interview.
Was this a part of the pilot? Oh, okay.
This is for the interview.
Okay.
So the interview is you going and doing like a demo class. So I had just like this group of kids. I'm like so overwhelmed.
Had you taught catechism classes at this point, or was this like fresh out of college?
Yeah, I'm fresh out of college. Yeah,
like first time class, basically.
Like, I mean, since I studied elementary education, I had experience in the classroom. Like, that was something I was comfortable with. But like, I don't know these kids. I don't know their names. Like, essentially, I walk in, their teacher walks out, and I'm the teacher now. And someone sits in the back and like writes notes while I'm teaching. So I was like, okay.
That's a nightmare scenario for me.
Yeah, for me, that was the most comfortable part. That was the most comfortable part of this whole interview, was actually getting to be in the classroom in front of the kids.
Okay.
I was like, kids, great, I can do this. Like, if I can't do anything else, I can do this. And I did that. And so then, you go through some other interviews, you get to watch the after school program, you go to dinner, whatever else is part of the interview. I remember, though, on the plane ride back, to all of this to answer your question of, it was the kids that made me want to be there. I met those kids, and I was completely floored by like the answers, just the complete childlikeness of all of them. And it was a 20-minute lesson that I did with them, but just the way they impacted me in that 20 minutes, I knew right then and there, I was like, if this works out and they offer me a job, like, this is what I'm doing. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was, they're incredible.
That's a big decision.
Yeah.
Graduating college. What's my next step? Where am I going to go? Am I going to New York City? You get there. You're getting hard pitched by the street vendors. You're bouncing around. You're shivering. Yeah. You're crying. Like all of like you compound all that. You're thinking, all right, I don't know if this is meant to be.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting.
Yeah. I mean, God made it very clear, because I think if it were up to me, I think if it were my decision, I would have picked Life Teen all day long. Like, that's where the desire was, but he was like, no, I want this. And so he made it very clear through that experience, even though it may have seemed like, yeah, like you said, I'm crying, I'm at the wrong school. On paper, it looks like a terrible interview. Like, it looks like I just bombed the whole thing.
It's a sign.
Right.
I
would have walked into the first wrong school, been like, that's the Paraclete, and I'm out.
Yeah.
I fly home.
That's what I was ready to do. And,
I would have.
And God was like, nope, you don't get out this easily. Like, you don't get to quit just like that. And yeah, and I think the kids were also a big decision, or a big reason I stayed too. It was because of the students that I got to serve and just their witness. And that was also the hardest part about leaving too. Throughout all of this, the students that I worked with were the most important part of that journey of being in the Bronx and working at this school. Because having to tell them that I was leaving and moving to Florida, like, that was hard, because they didn't understand that. And so many of them have experienced their whole lives, like, people leaving and that abandonment. And so to be another person on that list was heartbreaking for me. Like, that was something I really struggled with for a long time, with making the decision to leave and not be there anymore. So yeah, they're such special kids.
My head, man, I'm a cartoon. I'm going back to this 1% on your phone, and then I'm thinking, all right, John Barreto has 1% on his phone. He has enough time to call one person and ask them what question. Who are you calling and wanting them to ask? What are you asking them before the phone turns off?
Me? I'll probably call Jimmy John's, ask them if they deliver.
McDonald's? Yeah. Is the McRib back?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think one question, 1%, one person in the exact same scenario,
It was just a fun thought. Sure.
No, I like this question. I like this question. I have to
general,
think about it.
You got 1%. You can make one call and ask one question.
Who
are you calling? What are you asking them?
One question. I think I'd probably call my mom. I don't even know if I ask her a question. See, my mind went immediate doomsday. Like, my mind is like, I just call my mom, tell her I love her. I'm about to die. I'm on 1%.
Right, you're on 1%.
I immediately went to like, I'm on 1%. Like, I'm about to die. I think if the phone's almost dead, I just call whoever I'm about to do the thing with. If my phone's about to die and I have something going on, I just call whoever I'm about to do it with because I'm like, yo, in case you try and contact me, I'm out. Phone's dead. I'm gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've memorized a lot of phone numbers as a result of this because my phone will die. So I have like enough phone numbers memorized that in any situation I could just ask a stranger for their phone and then call that person.
All right, so Christmas gift for Jesslyn, get her a portable charger.
Yeah, I have two and I don't use. You have to charge those. So
You just buy a new one every time.
yeah, buy a new one.
You're
It's
a
like,
timely person. It's an interesting quirk because I'm figuring, what's that rooted in? Is it organization? But you're a pretty organized person. Are you not a prepared person? But
no, I
you're
don't.
a teacher. You're pretty.
I don't charge my phone. That's what it's rooted in. I will see.
Okay,
I'm
you're
like,
just not feeling it. All right.
I'll like see that it's at, I don't know, like 50 something when I go to bed. I'm like, that's enough. Like, I'm sure if we went and got I actually know if you went and got my phone right now, it is in fact at like 2 or 3% because I got home last night.
Okay.
I was traveling, got back in. My charger was in my backpack and I was already in my bed. And I was like, well, hopefully the 32% it's on right now will be enough to last me through tomorrow. And that's what
That's crazy because you have like an outlet by your desk. You
Yeah.
can charge during the day. I think this is really just a function of you not having an amygdala. Because
Right.
like I would get stressed at the like if I wake up and my phone is on 98 even, I'm like, all right,
Really?
day's shot. It's more of just a mental thing though.
Yeah. Well,
It's like
I'm gonna mail it in. It's just,
it always
yeah,
happens
if
too.
it's at 98, I'm like, didn't charge right. The whole day's off. And I go back to bed and I just try again the next day.
It always happens when I'm at airports too, because I think part of that too is like usually you can't charge your phone on the plane, like, or at least I'm flying Spirit and Frontier, so I can't charge my phone on these planes.
you gotta be mindful of that.
Yeah, so
Nightmare scenario.
yeah, so I'm like, I get off the plane and I'm like, every time I land back in Tampa, I'm like, guess what? My phone's at? It's 1 or 2%. I call the Uber, so my 1% is used to call the Uber and hope that he makes it there and he knows that it's me.
That's so stressful.
The worst one, this would stress
Totally.
you out, John. I was flying to Atlanta for a wedding. So I had to fly to Atlanta and then drive to Montgomery, Alabama. I was picking up my friend and I forgot my charger and my phone was going to die. I had the rental car. So I texted my friend. I was like, hey, I'll pick you up at the Atlanta airport. Like, just let me know what airline you're on. The Atlanta airport's huge. So it's not an easy place to find someone. I leave. I'm like, hey, I'm in this color car. This is what the license plate looks like. I'll see you in a few minutes. My phone dies. So I have no GPS to get from the rental car to the Atlanta airport. I like pull up. I was like,
In Atlanta
man.
Airport, you're like driving around Saturn.
Yeah, it is. It's like there's
gigantic.
2 terminals. There's a million people everywhere.
Wow.
And I was like, it'll be a miracle if we find each other. And St. Anthony pulled through because we both prayed to St. Anthony. And then there she was, not with all the rest of the people on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. She was on the left, like by herself. And I was like, wow, St. Anthony.
That's
St.
so
Anthony
much
came
game.
through.
If I die and I wake up at the Atlanta airport, I'll know that I didn't make it to heaven. I'll know that
That's so true.
that's hell. I did
Yeah,
it. I'm
it's
too bad.
man.
Well, to wrap
miracle.
this up, as we're getting closer to 45 minutes, I'd love to know what are Jesslyn's X number of takeaways from the Seton Teaching Fellows? What's like your gospel to preach from this time?
X number of takeaways, not ex-boyfriends. We're not.
Has a lot of those.
Yeah, because
Right.
we're not
There's
doing
a
that.
lot of
All
those.
one.
Because Jesslyn is a socialite, though. We didn't get to talk about that. You really enjoy to travel and seeing
do.
things. But those
I
are
do.
two. We're not getting into those
We're not,
categories.
we're not
today.
even going to mention ex-boyfriends.
Okay.
We're going to do takeaways.
No,
gonna
we're
do
definitely
takeaways.
not going to mention their names either. We're just
Yeah,
going to.
we'll leave that out of this.
Takeaways.
Takeaways.
Confidentiality agreement.
Yeah, you can come to do you have like a after podcast? Like, you know how some people will do
Wow.
like a post.
Nets out of the water.
Yeah, nets out of the water. You guys can tune in for
We
nets
reeled
out
in,
of the water.
The holiness is gone.
Yeah.
And it's nets out of the
It's
water
just
now.
us talking about my dating
About
history.
exes, history, drama,
all
anything.
the drama.
Yeah,
We kept it together for the most part. I'm actually
We did. This was good.
surprised.
I'm really
I
proud
thought,
of
I
us.
thought we really
Yeah.
stayed on track.
No, this is
I
good.
thought it was just going to be completely off the chain for 45 minutes.
No, this
but
was nice.
That's what
This has
nets
been
out
really
of the
nice.
water is the next.
That's nets out of the water.
So yeah,
Nets
stay
out of the
tuned.
water. Yeah.
Okay.
That's sponsored by Jack Daniels. Nets out of the water.
Alrighty. Well, my takeaways from the Seton Teaching Fellow program.
You asked her the two or three top takeaways from that specific.
From the Seton Teaching Fellows.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest takeaways I had during that time, there's two that come to mind. One of them, there was the church that I went to, St. Anselm's, beautiful church. At the top of the church, it says, "Let the service of God be thy first delight." So I'd walk in after a really long day and just be getting ready for mass.
Wow,
and I'd look up
you.
and I see that. And every time I saw it, I was like, okay, like I will delight in this, whether I want to or not. But this, and by the end of the time, it was like, yeah, serving God is what I want to do now for the rest of my life. Like my whole life should be in service of God. And so that was a big takeaway, was just continuing to serve in whatever way I was being called to serve, in whatever way God was asking, even if that looks different than what I thought it should look like or what I wanted. So that was a big takeaway. And then kind of in line with that, just realizing that God is always going to call us somewhere that's going to lead us deeper in relationship with him, as long as we are following his will and staying aligned to that. And I say that because initially, like, I wanted to go be a life teen missionary or do something else, or maybe go straight into just teaching. And he made it very clear that even though it wasn't what I expected, I never had like a desire to move to New York City or do this program. He used that, and I like grew in my faith because of that, because I was open to the ways he was transforming me. And the challenge, like, that year was challenging. It was one of the hardest years of my life, but also the most transformative and beautiful. So I think the important reminder of, just going where we're called to go and saying yes, like just saying yes today. And I think as an educator, that's something I've always kept in mind. Like, I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like, especially with teaching. Every day looks different. Even if you have it planned out, every day looks different, because you're walking into, 30 kids who knows what kind of day they had, who knows what kind of night they had. And so just being able to say yes today to whatever God's calling you to, and running with that was another huge takeaway of that year.
Let the service of God be thy first delight.
Mm-hmm. Let the service
What a
of
great
God
thing to
be
be
thy first delight.
Dang.
Hitting you every day, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your time. Shevin, thanks for coming on here as a co-host. Excited for this to kind of grow, see where this takes us. This is a fun little nets in the water curveball, throwing it. I like it.
No, I thought it was fantastic, and thank you so much for sharing your story, Jesslyn. It was great.
Thanks for having me.
Now, to close the podcast, every time we all clap at the same time.
Okay.
We are out.